3 days after she decided not to kill the Vampire King, the man who trained her finally arrived. He had spent 30 years hunting monsters and 14 years turning one little girl into the perfect weapon. What Ara didn't know was that she had never been his greatest success. He was already inside the castle. That was the first thing Ara understood when she saw the riders on the East Road, not approaching, not requesting entry, already inside. Mordecai Vane had not arrived this morning. He had arrived last night. While she slept, while the mark on her wrist glowed softly in the dark of her chamber, while Kaylin stood at the window of the circular room below and watched the East Road and said nothing to her because he had been waiting for this and had calculated, with 4 centuries of precision, exactly how much time they had. One night. That was what he had given her. One night of not knowing, because she had needed the sleep and he had understood that and said nothing. She understood this standing at her east window with the gray morning coming in cold through the glass and the 4 riders visible on the road and the specific cold certainty of a professional who has just realized the timeline she was operating on was not the real timeline. What Ara did not know, what nobody had told her, was that Mordecai Vane had been inside the Valdris Court for 11 hours. He had already walked her chambers. He had already read the device. He had already made his assessment. The performance she was about to give had already been judged before it began. She turned from the window. Kaylin was in the doorway. He was looking at her with those amber eyes and the expression she had learned to read as, "I have been deciding how much to tell you and have decided everything." "He was inside last night," she said. It was not a question. "Yes," he said. She breathed once. "How long have you known he would come early?" 2 days, he said. "I did not tell you because I needed to not know," she said. "Yes." She looked at him. She thought about 14 years of being the person who made these calculations for other people, the specific mercy of managed information, the specific cruelty of it. She understood why he had done it. She did not entirely forgive it. "We will discuss this," she said, "when it is over." He nodded. She straightened. She pressed her fingers against the inside of her left sleeve out of habit. The blade was not there. It was on the floor of the circular room 6 levels below her feet where she had set it 3 days ago. She had not replaced it. She had not needed to replace it. She was beginning to understand that she might have been wrong about that. She crossed to the mirror. She looked at her face. She found Serafina Vale in it, the pleasant containment, the mild eyes, the expression of a woman who was exactly what she appeared to be and nothing more. She put her on like a coat. She went downstairs. Mordecai Vane was standing in the castle's east garden, not the great hall, not the throne room, not any space that would have announced his arrival as significant or his presence as an event. The east garden, which meant he had been inside long enough to learn the castle's layout, which meant he had been inside long enough to choose his ground. She had trained under this man for 14 years. She had taken every operational lesson he had ever given her and filed it and used it and become, in his words, the best thing the guild had ever produced. She understood his methods the way you understood the methods of someone who had shaped you. She understood, standing at the garden entrance watching him examine a frost-killed rosebush with the focused attention of a man who was actually thinking about something else entirely, that he had chosen the East Garden because it was the location she would trust most. The location that would feel like her ground rather than his. He had given her the illusion of home advantage. It was the oldest move he had. Mordecai Vane was not the most physically dangerous man Ara had ever worked for, but he was the most dangerous man she had ever known. Because the most dangerous thing about him was not what he could do. It was what he knew, and what he knew about her was everything. He looked up when she approached. His face was exactly as she remembered it. Neat, gray-haired, precise in his movements and his expressions in the way of a man who had been controlling both for so long it had become simply his face rather than a performance. Small eyes that were sharper than they looked. a mouth that produced pleasant professional warmth on command and meant none of it. She had been looking at that face her entire professional life. She was only now seeing it clearly. "Serafina," he said. The name landed on her like a test. She smiled her cover story smile. "Mordecai," she said. "I did not know you were coming personally." "I was in the region," he said. His voice was mild. I thought I would check on our progress." Our progress, she thought, as if it belonged to both of them equally. She stood beside him at the rosebush. She looked at the frost-killed branches with the mild interest of a woman with nothing to hide. "The courtship period is proceeding well," she said. "He is—" She paused in exactly the way a woman performing romantic uncertainty would pause. Attentive. Mordecai looked at the rosebush. "I am glad to hear it," he said. "The bonding ceremony is in 15 days. She kept her expression exactly as she wanted it. "I am aware," she said. He turned to look at her then. His small, sharp eyes moved over her face with the specific quality of someone who had spent 30 years reading the faces of people trained to be unreadable. She held still under it. She held still the way she had learned to hold still under exactly this kind of assessment, the way he had taught her to hold still. She was using his own training against him. She hoped it was enough. What Ara did not know was that Mordecai Vane had been reading her face for 30 seconds, and in 30 seconds he had seen 3 things she did not know she was showing. He had not decided yet what to do with them. "You look well," he said finally. "Thank you," she said. "The castle suits you," he said. She smiled. "It is growing on me," she said. He looked back at the rosebush. "Good," he said. The east garden was very quiet around them. She understood that she had passed the first assessment. She understood that there would be more. The second assessment came 2 hours later. She was in the library, the North Tower, 6 floors, the amber warmth of the reading lamps and the specific silence of a room that had been accumulating knowledge for centuries. When Declan found her. She had not heard him come. That was unusual. Declan was not as quiet as she was, but he was considerably quieter than most. She felt him before she heard him, a warmth at her wrist, the mark responding to something in his proximity that she had not been able to account for until now. She turned. He was standing at the end of the shelf she was browsing, medium height, lean, the forgettable face that was an asset in their line of work, brown hair, gray eyes that were sharper than they looked. He was looking at her with an expression she had never seen on him in 14 years of working beside him. He looked uncertain. Declan was never uncertain. She opened her mouth. He shook his head. He walked toward her. He stopped 2 feet away. He reached across with his right hand and pushed up the left sleeve of his shirt. She looked at his inner wrist. A mark. Not the same as hers, different shape, different color, a deep forest green that shimmered slightly in the amber lamplight. The specific green of old pine forests in winter, larger than her crescent mark, more complex in its shape. But unmistakably the same kind of thing. Glowing. Faintly, steadily, the way hers glowed when something significant was near. She stared at it. She looked up at his face. What Era had believed for 14 years was that she was the guild's best operative. What she understood now, looking at Declan's wrist in the North Tower library, was that she had never been the only one. There had been 2 of them. There had always been 2 of them. And neither of them had known about the other. "How long?" she said. His gray eyes were very still. "I was born with it," he said. "Same as you, I assume. They told me it was a scar. Training injury. I stopped asking about it when I was 12 because asking produced," he paused, "consequences." She understood what he meant by consequences. She had stopped asking questions at 12 as well. "When did it start glowing?" she said. "The moment I walked through the castle gates yesterday," he said. "I have been standing in corridors trying to understand it for 11 hours. She looked at his mark. "I know what it is," she said. She watched the breath he took when she said it. She knew exactly what that breath meant. She had taken the same one 3 days ago. "Tell me," he said. She glanced at the library entrance. "Not here," she said. He nodded. He pulled his sleeve down. They had been trained side by side for 14 years. They had competed and cataloged and measured each other with the specific professional thoroughness of two people who understood that knowing the person most likely to be sent after you might one day keep you alive. What neither of them had known was that they had been doing all of this as the same thing. And the Guild had known. The Guild had always known, and had said nothing to either of them. She brought Declan to Kaelin. This was not a small decision. She stood in the corridor outside Kaelin's study for 3 seconds with Declan beside her, and she thought about what she was doing, bringing the Guild's second-best operative into the confidence of the vampire king she had been sent to kill. And she thought about 3 days ago on a stone floor with a blade set between them and a burned palm resting face up and the mark blazing and two things recognizing each other across everything that had been done to keep them apart. She knocked. Kaelin opened the door. He looked at her. He looked at Declan. He looked at Declan's left wrist. "Come in," he said. They sat in the study, the three of them, in the amber warmth of the reading lamps, and Kaelin told Declan what he had told Ara 3 days ago in the circular room. The liminal bloodlines, the marks, the recognition rite, the Guild's 100 years of acquisition and suppression, the 11 names. Declan sat very still through all of it. He asked no questions while Kaelin spoke. He was doing what Ara had done, filing, cataloging, running the information against 14 years of things he had observed and wondered about and filed under. Questions that produce consequences. When Kaelin finished, Declan was quiet for a long time. The fire crackled between them. Then he said, "I have been inside Mordecai's private communications for 6 years. Both of them looked at him. He looked back with his forgettable face and his sharp gray eyes. "I memorized his personal encryption codes in my 3rd year," he said. "I have been reading his private channels since then. Not continuously, selectively, when something felt wrong." He paused, which was frequently. He reached into his jacket and produced a slim, folded document. He set it on the desk between them. "It is a list," he said. "Every liminal acquisition Mordecai has personally overseen in 30 years. Names, ages at acquisition, current operational status, assigned counterpart targets." Ara looked at the list. She found her own name near the top. Vale, A, age at acquisition, 9. Current status, active field operative. Assigned target, Kaelin Valdris Court. She looked at Declan's name below it. Declan, no surname listed. Age at acquisition, 7. Current status, active field operative. Assigned target, listed as pending, classification level above Declan's clearance. She looked up at him. "You never knew your target," she said. "No," he said. "I was always told I was between assignments." She thought about 7 years old. 2 years younger than she had been. 2 additional years of not knowing. She said, "He brought one with him." Declan said, "Yes." He produced a second document. "Her name is Sable," he said. 20 years old. Guild trained since 11. She does not know what she is. She is wearing a suppression band on her left wrist that she has been told is a locator device. Mordecai brought her as a contingency, in case you could not be recovered. The word recovered sat in the room. "In case I could not be recovered," Ara said. Declan said, "He has a replacement, someone younger, someone who does not know, someone he can aim at Kaelin the moment he decides you are gone," Ara said. "Yes," Declan said. She had been the best. She had always known she was the best. What she had not known, what this document told her in the specific cold language of operational planning, was that the Guild had never relied on one weapon. Not once. Not ever. There had always been someone younger and newer and not yet knowing, waiting in reserve for the moment the current best became inconvenient. She set the document down. She stood. She walked to the window. She stood there for a moment with her back to both of them. She needed 3 seconds. She allowed herself 3 seconds. Then she turned around. "I need to talk to her," she said. "Tonight, before anything else changes," Kaylin said. "That is not—" "I know," she said. "I know every version of this is complicated. I know Mordecai will be watching her movements." She looked at Kaylin. She said, "3 days ago, you gave me time. You gave me the library and the morning teas and 20 minutes at a window and a room I could find on my own terms." She said, "She does not have 3 days, but she deserves more than nothing." The amber eyes were warm and certain. He said, "Then we will make sure she has something." The private meeting with Mordecai happened that afternoon. He requested it the way he always requested things, not as a demand but as a mild professional suggestion that communicated underneath the mildness that declining was not a real option. She went. They sat in the castle's formal receiving room, cold and grandly furnished and entirely neutral, and Mordecai looked at her across the table with those small, sharp eyes and said the thing she had not expected. He said, "I am proud of you." She held her expression. He said, 14 years, every mission, every assignment, not one failure. Do you understand how rare that is?" She said, "I am beginning to understand a great many things." He looked at her. Something moved in his expression. Very fast, extremely controlled, gone in a second. He said, "You have gotten close to him." She said, "That was the assignment." He said, "There is close and there is close, Serafina." She held the name without flinching. She said, "I am a professional. I know the difference." He studied her. Then he said, "I found you when you were 9 years old in a situation that did not give you many futures. I saw what you were. I built what you became. The skills you have, the precision, the ability to walk into any room in the world and be exactly what it requires. I gave you that." She said nothing. He said, "Everything you are capable of, I made possible." She said, "I know." He said, "I need you to complete this mission, not for the guild, for what comes after, for the work we have been doing for 30 years, for the 11. He stopped. The room went completely still. He had almost said 11. He had stopped himself, but she had heard it. He did not know she already knew about the 11. And some part of him, some part buried under 30 years of acquisition work and managed necessity, had almost said it anyway. The structure was cracking. She could see the crack. She said, "Mordecai." He looked at her. She said, "Why did you come yourself?" He was quiet. He said, "Because of what the bonding ceremony would mean, if it completes. The field disruption that a recognition rite produces," she said, "human communities would wake up." He stared at her. The silence lasted 4 full seconds. She watched him understand. She watched him understand that she knew. She watched the ground he was standing on shift beneath him in a way that had not happened to Mordecai Vane in a very long time. "You found the room," he said. "Yes," she said. He said nothing. She said, "I know what the mark is. I know what the guild has been doing. I know about the 11 names. I know about Sable in the South guest quarters with a suppression band on her wrist she has been told is a locator device." She leaned forward. "And I know," she said, "about Mara." The word landed in the room like something physical. Mordecai went completely still. Era had trained 14 years to control her breathing. It still took her 3 tries before the next breath came out steady, because she had not planned to say the name. She had planned to hold it, to use it carefully, to deploy it with professional precision at exactly the right moment for maximum effect. But it had come out anyway, because she was not entirely a professional anymore, and the name of a woman who had died alone, not knowing what she was, because the man across the table had chosen 30 years of architecture over her. That name had come out of Era's mouth before she could stop it, because some part of her that was not the operative and had never been the operative had needed it to. She breathed. She held herself. She looked at Mordecai. His face had done something she had never seen it do, not the controlled professional expression, not the pleasant authority, not the specific managed warmth of a man who had been performing something for 30 years so consistently that performance had become simply his face. His face had stopped. Just stopped, like a mechanism encountering something it had not been built to process. He said her name very quietly. He said, Mara. Just that. He did not speak for a long time after that. He looked at his hands. The receiving room was absolutely silent. Then he spoke, not the mild, professional version, the version underneath it. He said, her name was Mara Voss. Speech. She said nothing. Reaction. She let the silence be the reaction. She had learned from Kaelin that silence could do what words could not. He said, I found her when I was 31. Before the guild existed as it does now, I was building something. I believed in it. He paused. I felt the recognition, he said. I knew what it was. I had been researching the liminal bloodlines for 2 years. He looked at the table. I had a choice, he said. Her or the work. He said it flatly. Like a man reading a sentence he had written so long ago he no longer remembered writing it, but could still recite it perfectly. I chose the work, he said. Silence. She died 3 years later, he said. Alone. Not knowing what she carried. Not knowing why the mark on her wrist had begun to blaze in the months before she died in ways she could not explain. He looked up. She had been blazing, he said, because I had completed enough of the recognition that her mark had activated even without the rite, and there was no one to tell her what it meant. Ara looked at him. There it was. The specific weight of it. Not the guild, not the acquisition network, not 30 years of organized wrongdoing. One man, one choice, one woman who had died blazing without anyone to explain why. Everything else was architecture built on top of that. She said, and after. He said, I built the acquisition network the year after. Short, flat. The sentence of a man who had said this to himself so many times it had worn smooth. He said, I told myself I was protecting the ones I found, giving them purpose, giving them belonging. I told myself what I did was better than what would have happened without me. He looked at the table again. She said nothing. She waited, because the rhythm of this required waiting. Speech. Silence. The thing he was building toward, he said I was lying. He said it quietly and completely and with no performance in it at all. I have known for 40 years that I was lying, he said. And I kept going because stopping meant looking directly at what I chose, and I was... He stopped. He said I was not capable of that. Era sat very still. She thought about 9 years old, about 14 years, about the private place where she kept her real name and the man across the table who had built the need for that private place. She thought about what it would cost her to say the next thing. She said, I almost made the same choice. He looked up. She said 3 days ago, in the circular room, the blade in my hand, 14 years of professional certainty on one side and something real on the other. I almost chose the certainty. She met his eyes. She said, the difference between what I did and what you did is not that I am stronger than you were. It is that I had more time and better conditions and someone patient enough to give me both. He looked at her for a long moment. He said, you sound like her. She said, like who? He said, Mara. She was not afraid of anything that needed to be looked at directly. Ara held this. She held it carefully. Then she stood. She crossed to the window. She looked at the east road. Then she turned. She said, I am not going to forgive you. He nodded. She said, but I am not going to destroy you either. She crossed back to the table. She set the encrypted device down between them. She said, the network, every acquisition contact, every file, every suppression location, every communication between the guild and the vampire factions funding it. You are going to give us all of it. She looked at him. She said, and then you are going to spend whatever time you have left being useful for the first time in 40 years. He looked at the device. He looked at her. He said, you built this from what I gave you. She said, yes. He said, I did not consider. She said, no, You did not. Silence. He picked up the device. He said 12 hours. She said 11. The corner of her mouth moved, not quite a smile, the barely there beginning of one. His expression shifted. Something in it that was not professional warmth, and was not the managed authority, and was not the 30 years of architecture. Something that was simply grief and recognition, and the specific expression of a man who has seen himself clearly for the first time in a very long time and found it unbearable and necessary in equal measure. He said, "She would have liked you." Ara said nothing. He said, "Mara. She would have." She said, "I know." She walked to the door. She stopped. She said, "Mordecai." He looked at her. She said, "I am sorry about Mara." She meant it. She left. She made it to the corridor. She made it 12 steps down the corridor and around the corner where there were no guards and no windows and no one who could see her. Then she put her back against the stone wall. She pressed her marked wrist flat against the stone. She breathed. The castle wall was warm under her wrist. She stood there for 1 minute, 1 full minute of not being a professional, of not being composed, of being a person who had just sat across a table from the closest thing to a parent she had ever had and told him she was not going to forgive him and meant it absolutely, and was also, underneath the absolute meaning of it, devastated. The mark glowed softly against the warm stone. The castle recorded her standing in the corridor with her back against the wall. After 1 minute, she straightened. She smoothed her dress. She walked. She found Kalen in the circular room. He was at the basin. He looked up when she entered, and whatever was in her face made him cross the room immediately. He stopped in front of her. He did not touch her. He simply stood close enough that she could feel the warmth of him and looked at her face with those amber eyes that had become one of the only things she fully trusted. "Are you all right?" he said. She thought about it honestly. "No," she said. "Not entirely, but I will be." He waited. She said, "He is going to give us the network. 11 hours. Kalen said, "And after?" She said, "After he walks out of the gate and does whatever a man does when the structure he built his entire life around is gone. That is not mine to solve for him." She paused. She said, "Sable is." She looked at him. "I need to go to her tonight," she said. "Before everything changes." He said, "Mordecai will know." She said, "By the time it matters, it will not be able to stop anything." She looked at him directly. She said, "I was her 4 weeks ago. Everything she believes about herself right now is what I believed. And the only reason I am standing in this room is that someone gave me time and a room I could find on my own terms and a burned palm resting face up on a stone floor." She said, "I cannot give her all of that. But I can give her one true thing. Tonight." The amber eyes were steady. He said, "I will clear her corridor at midnight." She said, "Thank you." She was turning when he said, "Ara." She stopped. He said, "What you said. About the choice 3 days ago, about almost choosing the 14 years of certainty." She looked at him. He said, "I want you to know that if you had completed the mission, I would not have stopped you." She stared at him. He said, "I arranged everything. The marriage requirement, the timeline, the circular room, the best possible conditions for you to find the truth. But I was not going to compel you toward a choice. If you had chosen the blade, it would have been your choice." He held her gaze. He said, "And I would have understood." She looked at him for a long time. She said, "That is the most terrifying thing you have ever told me." He said, "Yes." She said, "You arranged 2 years of preparation and were genuinely willing to let it end with a blade." He said, "I was willing to let you choose. Those are not the same thing." She looked at him. She thought about the difference between Mordecai and this man, between a person who prevented choices and a person who arranged for them and stood back. She said, "When this is over, when the network is gone and Sable is free and the names are accounted for." He looked at her. She said, "I want to complete the recognition rite." His expression, not the barely there beginning of a smile, the full one, the one that made him look like someone who had been young once and was remembering what that felt like. He said, "So do I." She went to Sable at midnight, the South guest quarters, 60 feet from her own chambers. 2 liminal operatives sleeping in the same castle the previous night, one knowing and one not knowing, separated by 60 feet of ancient stone. She knocked. A pause. The door opened. Sable was 20 years old and looked younger. Dark hair, close cut. Brown eyes still carrying some warmth the guild had not entirely managed to train away. Slight build, practical dark clothing. The expression of someone who had been told the operative currently in residence was compromised and was looking at that operative through a doorway at midnight. She said, "You should not be here." Ara said, "I know." She said, "Mordecai said." Ara said, "I know what Mordecai said." Sable's hand moved toward her left wrist, toward the band. Ara said, "It is not a locator device." Sable went still. Ara said, "The band on your wrist is not what you were told it is. It is a suppression device. It is keeping something locked down that has been trying to activate since you walked through these gates." She said, "I know because I carried the same thing for 23 years without knowing I was carrying it." She raised her left wrist. The crescent mark blazed dark red-violet in the midnight corridor. Sable looked at it. Her brown eyes went very wide. Ara said, "I am not going to tell you everything tonight. There is not enough time for everything, but I am going to tell you one thing." She held Sable's gaze. She said, "You are not what they made you." She said, "You are what you were before they found you." She said, "And what you were is something extraordinary." Sable looked at the blazing mark. She looked at Ara's face. Ara said, "You do not have to do anything tonight. I am not asking you to choose. I am just asking you to know that a choice exists." She turned to go. She had taken 3 steps down the corridor when she heard it. She turned. Sable was standing in the doorway, her right hand wrapped around the suppression band on her left wrist. She said, "How long does it take to understand what you are?" Ara said, "Longer than 1 night, but it starts immediately." She said, "Will it hurt?" Ara thought about the circular room, the symbols, the mark blazing, 14 years of constructed certainty coming apart at the same time as something real and entirely hers blazed for the first time. She said, "Yes, but not the way you are afraid it will." Sable looked at the band. She wrapped both hands around it. She removed it. The corridor blazed forest green. Sable gasped. She looked at her wrist. The mark there, complex, deep forest green, shimmering, was blazing with everything that had been suppressed for 9 years finally given air. She looked at Ara. Her expression, the specific devastating expression of someone receiving a truth about themselves that restructures everything. Ara recognized it completely. She crossed back to Sable. She stood beside her in the blazing green light. She said, "I know." She said, "I know exactly what this feels like." She said, "You are not alone in it." And somewhere in the south corridor of the Valdris Court at midnight, the castle wall was warm under both their hands. Recording. Recording the moment the guild's second weapon turned around. Recording the beginning of what was going to be, improbably, dangerously, at enormous cost. Something that looked like freedom. In the morning, Mordecai's device arrived at Kalen's study door. A message attached in his handwriting. 11 hours and 40 minutes. Slightly ahead of schedule. The message read, "Everything, as agreed." There is one additional file I did not mention yesterday. It concerns the origin of the acquisition network's funding. You will want to read it before you act on the network contacts. It changes the shape of certain things. Below that, a single line. "She sounds like Mara when she is not trying to sound like anyone. That is yours. I did not give her that." Ara read the message. She set it down. She picked up the device. She began to read. The first file opened, then the second. She read for 4 minutes. Her expression did not change. Kalen was watching her from across the room. He watched her read. He watched her reach the 4th file. He watched her stop. He watched her read the same page twice. He said, "Ara." She did not answer. He crossed the room. He said, "What is it?" She turned the device so he could see the page. He read it. His expression shifted. She said, "This file is about me." He said nothing. She said, "Not about the guild, not about the network, about me, specifically, about where my bloodline comes from." She stood up. She walked to the window. She stood there for a moment. This was not the 1-minute corridor moment. This was quieter than that. This was the specific stillness of someone who has already been remade twice in 3 weeks and is standing at the edge of a third remaking and is simply breathing, giving herself one breath before she turns around and becomes whatever comes next. She turned. She said, "Kalen." He looked at her from across the room. She said, "I need you to tell me everything you know about the original liminal bloodlines, not the manuscript, not the general history." She said, "I need you to tell me about the specific bloodline that the Valdris Court was founded to protect." Well, something moved in his amber eyes. She crossed the room slowly. She stopped in front of him. She said, "Because according to this file, I am not simply liminal." One step closer, she said, "I am the last of the bloodline the Valdris Court was built around." The castle pulsed below them. Dark red-violet light bleeding up through the stone from the circular room 6 floors down. She said, "Which means this castle was not recording us simply because we are counterparts." She said, "It was recording us because I am the reason it was built." The silence stretched. 4 seconds, 5. She looked at his face, at the amber eyes, at the expression that was not surprise. She said, "You knew." He said, "I suspected. I did not know with certainty until the night you arrived." She said, "When were you going to tell me?" He said, "When you were ready to hear it." She held his gaze. She thought about Mordecai at the receiving room table. She thought about I was not capable of that. She thought about the difference between a man who built an architecture to avoid a truth and a man who waited with his whole self for someone to be ready to receive one. She breathed. She said, "I am ready now." He looked at her. He took the device from her hand. He set it on the desk. He said, "Then sit down." He said, "Because what I am about to tell you changes the shape of everything that has happened since the night you walked through those gates." He said, "The guild was not simply afraid of the recognition rite." He looked at her with those 4-century amber eyes blazing warm and certain in the gray morning light. He said, "They were afraid of you, specifically, by name." He said, "Before you were born." The castle was very still. The dark water moved 6 floors below. Recording, recording, recording. Episode 3, What Was Always Yours. She came to kill a king. She stayed to become what the castle was built for, and what she is, what she has always been, is the one thing the guild feared most. Not a weapon, not simply a liminal operative, not even simply a counterpart, something older, something the dark water in the circular room has been waiting 400 years to record. Subscribe. The finale is coming. It ends with everything, and what comes next will unmake everything you thought you knew.